Welcome back to the deep dive. So we've got this stack of research in front of us today, and it's basically asking us to, open up the bonnet of the British political machine and look at the engine.
Yeah.
And what we're finding in there is, well, it's a massive paradox. It's one of those things that once you see it, it explains so much of the friction you see on the news every night.
It really does. It reframes the whole way you watch Parliament.
We are talking about the House of Lords. Now, if you look at a textbook, I mean, literally, if you go back to high school civics, the definition is pretty standard. Everyone agrees on it. The Lords is a revising chamber.
A mechanics.
Exactly. They're the mechanics.
Yeah.
Their job is to fix the typos, clarify the messy wording,
Yeah.
maybe tap the brakes gently to make sure the car doesn't veer off the road. It's technical.
Precisely. The classic definition is technical scrutiny.
Mm.
The logic is that the House of Commons is the engine room. It's hot, it's fast, it's passionate. And in that rush, they might miss the fine print. So the Lords is supposed to be the cool, calm room where they catch those errors before they become law.
Right. But, and here's the twist, our sources for today argue that this definition is completely outdated. They suggest the Lords has evolved into something entirely different. Without anyone really planning it, it has become the nation's ethical conscience. It's become the place where the really heavy philosophical arguments about right and wrong actually happen.
Well, here's the kicker, and this is really the central thesis we're exploring. This shift wasn't a decision. No one sat down at some constitutional convention and wrote a rule saying, okay, from now on, the House of Lords is the Department of Ethics.
It wasn't a strategy. It was an accident.
Or, as the source material puts it, it happened by gravity.
Ethical gravity. I absolutely love that phrase. It sounds like a sci-fi movie title.
It's a perfect description, though. The argument is that ethical questions are weighty. They're heavy. And in a political system, heavy things tend to sink. They drift away from the unstable ground of the elected House, and they settle on the only stable ground available.
The unelected House.
The unelected House.
So our mission today is to unpack this accident. We need to figure out why ethical questions drift to the Lords. But maybe more importantly, we need to look at the consequences. Because as we'll see, when you force a technical chamber to do a moral job, things get messy. It creates what the authors call a gray zone.
It does. And to understand that gray zone, we have to start with the force of gravity itself. I mean, why did these questions fall out of the House of Commons in the first place?
Right, because on paper, you'd think the elected representatives, the people we actually vote for, they should be the ones deciding the moral direction of the country. That seems like democracy 101.
It does.
If we're deciding on, life and death or freedom and privacy, surely my MP should be the one making that call.
Theoretically, yes. But we have to look at the mechanics of the Commons. And the source makes a very specific point here. This isn't a criticism of MPs. It's not saying they're unethical people.
No, it's the system.
It is. It's saying they're operating in an environment that is structurally hostile to deep ethical reflection.
It's not the people, it's the pressure cooker.
Precisely. The House of Commons operates on extremely short time horizons. Every single MP knows that the next election is effectively just around the corner.
Always. Even if it's 4 years away, the campaigning mindset is permanent.
Exactly. So if you're an MP, you're thinking about your constituents, you're thinking about the party manifesto.
And you're thinking, how does this look on a leaflet in 6 months?
The leaflet test. Yes.
Yeah.
Debates in the Commons are framed by party commitments and electoral survival. That is just the nature of elected politics. It's fast, it's reactive, it's adversarial. You're there to win the argument for your side.
Not necessarily to explore the philosophical nuances of the other side.
No. Which doesn't leave a lot of room for slow, nuanced introspection about, the long-term moral soul of the nation.
You can't put, "I'm deeply conflicted about the nature of free will" on a campaign poster.
Exactly. So when you have a complex ethical dilemma, something that needs a 30-year view or something that challenges the immediate party line, it just doesn't stick in the Commons.
It slips away.
It slips away. The environment is too slippery. It's too dangerous for an MP to break ranks and start talking about abstract morality when their job depends on towing the line.
So the issue drifts upwards. It floats up the corridor to the House of Lords.
Where the incentives are completely different. The Lords aren't fighting an election in 6 months. In fact, many of them aren't fighting an election ever again. They have life peerages.
They have tenure, the ultimate job security.
And that changes the psychology completely. They have longer experience, often in fields outside of politics, law, science, religion, business.
And military, yeah.
So they have the luxury of time and the luxury of safety.
Safety is the key word. They have fewer immediate incentives to support a party narrative if they don't believe in it. So when an issue doesn't fit a tidy political box, it just floats.
It flows to the place with fewer constraints. It enters the Lords not through the front door of design, but through the side door of necessity.
Let's talk about what kind of issues we're seeing here. Because when we say ethics, I think people imagine just the really big headline-grabbing stuff.
And that is part of it. The source calls these the loud issues. Things like end-of-life care, assisted dying, asylum policy, surveillance powers, bioethics. These are clearly moral questions.
Everyone knows the stakes are high.
Right, but the source also mentions quiet issues. And I found this really fascinating because these are things that look, well, boring on the surface.
Things that look technical.
Yes. They look technical, but they hide a moral core. Take housing rules, for example, or the specific design of the welfare state, or climate trade-offs, or, and this is a big one, how the government uses citizen data.
Oh, that's a good one. Data use sounds like an IT problem. Where do we store the files?
Exactly. In the Commons, the debate might be about efficiency or cost or cybersecurity protocols. But when it gets to the Lords, the question shifts. It becomes, is it right for the state to know this about its citizens? How does this change the relationship between the individual and the government?
That is a huge shift. It goes from, does the software work, to, is this liberty?
And that is the function of the Lords now. They pick up the liberty question because the Commons is too busy asking the cost question.
Okay, so we've established the mechanism. The Commons is busy and pressured, so the deep, heavy stuff drifts to the Lords. That sounds okay. I mean, at least someone is doing it. If the Lords weren't there, maybe nobody would ask those questions.
Maybe not.
But our source material says this accidental arrangement actually creates 4 distinct problems. It's not a perfect system.
Far from it. Relying on an accident is dangerous. And the first danger is what they call the personalization of ethics.
Okay, let's unpack this. Problem 1.
Because there is no systemic role for ethics, there isn't a standing committee that says, we are the ethics committee, the burden of raising these points falls on individuals.
It becomes about people, not structure.
Exactly. And this is where you get those headlines. You know, the Archbishop of Canterbury slams the government, or former Supreme Court justice raises concerns.
Right. The source asks us to notice the pattern. We always ask, which bishop spoke up? Which famous scientist intervened?
We rely on the personal gravity of that individual to carry the ethical argument.
I can see why that works, though. I mean, if a highly respected former judge stands up and says, this law is fundamentally unjust, people listen. It cuts through the noise.
It does. That's the pro side of the double-edged sword. A trusted voice can pierce the political bubble. But the con side is that it makes the whole system incredibly fragile.
Fragile how?
Because the debate immediately shifts from substance to legitimacy. Instead of asking, is this argument correct? The media and the politicians start asking, who does he think he is?
Ah, right. Why should a bishop have a say in the 21st century? Or unelected judges shouldn't lecture us?
Precisely. Arguments become about the messenger, not the reasoning. If ethics is just about who is speaking, then you can dismiss the ethics by dismissing the person.
You don't like the bishop, you don't have to listen to the moral point.
Exactly. It becomes a culture war skirmish instead of a policy debate. And that leads us directly into the second problem, doesn't it? Because you mentioned the word unelected.
But the elephant in the room.
It is.
Problem 2 is moral weight without mandate. This is the tension that really stuck out to me in the reading. We have a system where we have deliberately stripped the lords of power because they aren't elected.
Right.
The whole point of modern democracy is that the elected house wins.
That is the constitutional deal. The lords cannot and should not overrule the democratic will of the people. But at the same time, we rely on them to say the difficult moral things. We expect them to flag long-term harms.
To be the adults in the room.
We expect them to be the adults. It's a total contradiction. We're telling them, you have no power because you're unelected.
But please use your power to stop us from doing something morally wrong. It's impossible.
It creates this gray zone. The lords are put in an impossible position. If they speak carefully and politely, they're ignored. They have no mandate.
But if they speak forcefully and actually try to stop something,
they're accused of overreach and thwarting the will of the people.
So they're expected to have moral weight, but they aren't allowed to use it.
Exactly. There is an expectation of conscience, but no agreed-upon mandate to act on it. It leaves them constantly second-guessing how hard they can push.
It's like being a backseat driver who is also a professional racing instructor. You know the car's about to crash, but you're only allowed to whisper
You
suggestions.
can't grab the wheel.
You can't grab the wheel.
That is a very apt analogy. And sometimes when you whisper, it sounds like you're just complaining about the route. Which brings us to problem 3.
The confusion of delay. This one is about optics, right? How things look on the outside.
It's about procedure. Think about how the Lord's actually does its work. They don't have a big red moral veto button.
Right. They can't just stamp unethical on a bill and send it back.
No, they have to use the normal tools of Parliament. Amendments, scrutiny clauses, motions to delay.
Paperwork. Editing the text.
It's procedural camouflage. And the problem is, to an outside observer or a busy journalist, a pause to discuss the deep moral consequences of a bill looks physically the same as a pause to fix a typo.
So if the Lords pause a bill because it violates fundamental human rights, or if they pause it because the grammar in Clause 4 is confusing, on the news, it just looks like the Lords are holding things up again.
Exactly. It creates an optical illusion. The system fails to distinguish between this text is sloppy and this policy is ethically troubling.
And that makes it really easy for the government, whichever government is in power, to just dismiss everything as obstruction.
Yes, it all gets lumped together. The unelected peers are blocking our agenda. We lose the nuance. We can't tell the difference between technical revision and ethical warning.
It feels like the signal is getting lost in the noise. The public doesn't know why the delay is happening, just that it's happening.
And the signal is also getting lost in time. That's problem 4.
Episodic bursts. That sounds like a medical condition.
It kind of is. For the system, this is about continuity. Because ethics doesn't have a proper home, there wasn't a standing committee for it. These debates happen in short, intense bursts.
I can picture this. A controversial bill arrives. Suddenly, everyone wakes up. The bishops give speeches, the experts write op-eds, the Lords debate late into the night. It's a huge spike in attention.
And
then the bill passes, or it's amended, and the moment passes. Everyone moves on to the next crisis.
Pop-up ethics.
Pop-up ethics, that's a great way to put it.
The source highlights that there is no institutional memory. The Lords doesn't accumulate reasoning. We don't carry the lessons from one ethical debate forward to the next one.
So every time a new issue comes up, say, first it's AI surveillance, and then 6 months later it's genetic editing, they have to rebuild the argument from scratch.
They have to rebuild the ground from scratch every single time. They have to reestablish why ethical scrutiny matters, reestablish their right to speak on it, and reframe the arguments.
That sounds exhausting.
The source describes it as exhausting and not especially effective. Imagine a court system where, for every trial, the lawyers had to re-explain the concept of justice to the judge before they could start.
You'd never get anywhere.
You can't build a consistent ethical framework if you're starting from zero every few months.
Okay, so let's zoom out a bit. We've got these 4 problems. Personalization, no mandate, confusion of delay, and episodic bursts. When you put them all together, what's the verdict? Is the House of Lords failing?
The source material is very careful here. It argues that the Lords isn't doing a bad job. In fact, considering the constraints, it's often doing a heroic job.
But it's doing a job it was never designed to do.
Correct. It's doing a job it inherited by default. We are asking one institution to do contradictory things. We want them to review legislation and fix technical flaws, which requires being pedantic, precise, and narrow.
And at the same time.
At the same time, we want them to provide long-term caution and moral wisdom, which requires being bold, philosophical, and broad. And we want them to do all that without actually having any real power.
It is a massive mismatch.
It is. And the tragedy, according to our source, is that when tensions arise, when the public gets angry or the government gets frustrated, we misdiagnose the problem.
We blame the players.
We argue about the bishops, we argue about left-wing lawyers or right-wing obstructionists, we argue about whether the Lords is too political, but we miss the deeper structural issue.
Which is?
The system hasn't given ethics a proper home.
We're blaming the gravity for pulling the apple down instead of asking why we didn't build a basket to catch it.
That's a great way to put it. We are relying on an accidental safety net that is starting to fray.
So, what does this all mean? Where do we go from here? Because usually when we talk about Lords reform, people talk about abolishing it or making it elected. But this deep dive suggests that might not actually solve this specific problem.
It might make it worse. If you make the Lords elected, you just recreate the House of Commons. You introduce the same electoral pressures, the same short time horizons.
The same party discipline. You lose the very gravity that pulls ethics there in the first place.
Exactly. If you turn the Lords into another room of politicians, the conscience has nowhere to go.
So what's the goal?
Well, the source argues the goal shouldn't be a louder or more moralistic chamber. We don't need peers shouting more. We need clarity.
We need a place where ethical questions are expected, not improvised.
Yes. The source suggests we need to move from accidental ethics to deliberate ethics.
And what does that look like?
It looks like a system where reasoning is structured, not episodic, where values are examined openly rather than being smuggled into technical debates about wording. It means acknowledging that checking the morality of a law is a different job than checking the legality of a law.
It's about creating a space where we can say, okay, the grammar in this law is fine, but is the soul of it right? Without being accused of just trying to slow things down.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that ethical scrutiny is a vital function of government, not just a byproduct of having older, experienced people in a room with nothing else to lose.
You know, it's funny, we spend so much time obsessing over the day-to-day politics, who is up, who is down, who won the debate. But this deep dive really highlights that the machinery underneath matters just as much.
The machinery determines the output. And if your machine isn't built to process ethical dilemmas, it will produce ethical accidents.
And we can't afford too many of those.
No, especially not with the complexity of the issues coming down the pipeline, AI, climate, bioethics. These aren't going to get any simpler.
So here is the provocative thought I want to leave you with today. We often think of the House of Lords as this dusty, ancient relic, holding us back from the modern world. We see the robes and the gold and think, what is this doing here? But what if, in a weird way, it's the only thing keeping us tethered to our values? And if that tether is accidental, what happens when it snaps?
That is the question. If we stop relying on the gravity of the Lords to catch the issues falling through the cracks of the Commons, we have to build something to replace it. Otherwise, those issues just hit the floor.
And nobody wants that. That wraps up our deep dive into the accidental conscience of the House of Lords. A big thank you to our expert for connecting the dots today.
Always a pleasure.
And thank you for listening. We'll catch you on the next deep dive. Keep asking questions.